Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Emily Friedman, and it's the end of week one of Introduction to Literary Studies. I'm going to be putting out a few shorter videos with different components of the first week of class. And I wanted to start with literally what I bring to class: printed copies of the syllabus, of course, printed out copies of Gina Zurovsky's Where Do You Know From for them to read as an initial exercise, and a sample of the mid-semester reflection on their labor that I'm going to ask them to fill out as both the midterm and the final exam. But we'll talk about those at a different point. Today, at this moment, I want to talk about the backpack I bring to class. Now, this is, for those of you that are curious, a carry-on sized uh, backpack, very heavy, very sturdy, really useful. I normally bring basically the equivalent of a international sized carry-on to class with me. This one also has a nice laptop sleeve. It's not an endorsement. It's just, this is the size of what I'm bringing to class on the first day. And I find it useful to have a bag of this size because at any given time, I may be bringing big boxes or just a lot of games. And what I try to do on the first day is spread out as many games as possible to share with students what they're going to be looking at and the kind of wide diversity of analog games, specifically TTRPGs. There are a few games that are non-negotiables because they're games that are going to be played in class. So this semester, Spine is one of the biggies. This is the print-on-demand version. You can get it at Mixum for about $10. And students would spend just about that much in printing costs if they get the PDF, print it, and assemble it themselves. Either one is totally acceptable because this is a book that the process of play is going to radically alter. So showing this is really important, as is showing the first game that we play for the Queen. This is the first edition from Evil Hat. This is the new edition from Darrington Press. Either one works, and it's actually really useful for my purposes as a book historian to have them together. And that's because the key difference, there are differences in prompts that we could get into in a kind of longer head-to-head, but what's immediately obvious to students is the change in format and the queens that are inside. So we play for the Queen, and there are other videos on my channel that walk through how I use For the Queen on the first day of class. Short version here is I cut the deck down radically. I have multiple copies of this game because usually my class is large enough that I want to split them into smaller groups. For a small group, about 15 cards will get you a good 20-ish minute game, especially with students who are not necessarily inclined to be super verbose early on. We're a small enough class that we actually all played together. That happens sometimes when I teach graduate courses, or in this class, just a really small class. And it's one of the first things we do because it's a game that teaches itself. It has everything you need. It does not require the creation of a character, but instead characters emerge in the process of play. Just a really handy introduction, whether you're in a classroom or not. And then after we play around, one, we do a kind of report on what happened. I find out how bloodthirsty or drama-seeking different groups of students are. But also, then I show them the different queens, and I say, hey, would you tell the same story with this queen as the controlling illustration? How did that shape the narrative? And that's one way of talking about these elements of mechanics that maybe are not immediately obvious, to kind of get them started thinking about these as physical objects, as objects where everything is an intentional choice. This semester, it's particularly handy to have For the Queen because James D'Amato will also be coming to class, the designer of this descended from the Queen game, Oh Captain, My Captain. And so that's a really nice, beautiful object to show to my students as well. I've got a stack of boxes that fit everything that you see fit into the backpack. I was very proud of my Tetris abilities. And that's because a lot of things are small. We've got Avery Alder's latest Going for Broke, which is about making rent. We, of course, I'm as Quinn's pilled as anybody. Um, uh, Better Strangers and Tacklebox. The latest English Juban Shah, which just came out by Chronic Insanity. It's the first UK one. I was very excited. Quinn's didn't even know about this when it landed on my doorstep during his visit. Um, Elliot Davis's The Time We Have, which is this beautiful box duet game. What really gets a lot of my students who are often education majors excited is games like Sign, which comes from the Golden Cobra Challenge in its original form, is intended to simulate, not replicate, the kind of experience of the development of Nicaraguan Sign Language, which is super cool. Games about language, of course, are a natural fit with a class on literary studies. Also exciting, and something that I do run a fair amount in my classes, is Alice is Missing. Of course, the format is beautiful. It plays in 90 minutes. So, with 75-minute classes, which is what I teach, usually I can do that in 4 class sessions. I can squeeze it if I need to, but that gives the kind of character development of safety tools, and debrief on the other end time to breathe. And roughly 2 days of class, I divide it kind of tidily for the actual running of the game, which has an amazing soundtrack. And you play this entirely, of course, using cell phones, which is really lovely. I also try to bring some big boxes of beautiful things. This time I brought City of Winter. If you don't know it already, it's in the latest big box roundup from Quinn's Quest. You can look up Heart of the Deernicorn, the publisher. But it's most famous, of course, for the fact that it has this incredibly beautiful setup of like cloth maps and scrolls and whatnot. And coins and all kinds of beautiful bits and bobs. Totally worth it. So I bring some boxes, but I'm also bringing other things like 15 Minutes of Fame, which is New York City, Andy Warhol, Nico, John Cage, and Albert Del Salvo. You are playing those folks in this kind of one night of gameplay. I love pulling out these days, and have for the last year or so, border writing, which is literally a map. And map games are something that I really love. My students also really love them. They're very attached, and that's why I have a whole big bucket of Amending by Xingyin Core, which you literally sew the map as you narrate the story of going to see your friend. And if you ever decide to stop your journey, you rip the map, and you have to mend it in order to start the journey again. Bluebeard's Bride is one that comes up a lot in my 18th century classes because, of course, the tales of Bluebeard kind of get popularized and disseminated and circulated in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And it's a beautiful, of course, game of feminist horror. One of the games that students almost always get excited about is this one because it looks so confusing. This is Illadelph, which I find, and I said this to my students, has the most elegant introduction to what a role-playing game is. And I actually read it out in class. Gameplay is conversational and narrative, cooperative. 4 players is ideal, but 3 to 6 is fine too. 1 player is the key narrator. They run the game for the other players. Everybody else creates a main character and controls them in the game. And then how do I do things? And it explains the spinner on the back. Because these games from Bull Press and others are designed for use in prisons by incarcerated people who do not have access to dice, cards, and other kinds of elements that are associated with gambling. So spinners are included in the book itself in order to provide that element of storytelling friction that makes for surprise and suspense. Um, I record long enough and my screen goes to interesting places. Um, this is unedited, can you tell? I'm also really excited for this new acquisition, My Brain is a Stick of Butter by Adam Bell, which is a solo game about life with ADHD that has you thinking about the ways that you can track your time and use your time. Preparing them for Spine means also showing them Becky Annison's Wreck This Deck. The book doesn't get destroyed, but a deck of cards does. I'm particularly excited these days by Variations on Your Body, which are games by Avery Alder that I'm hoping to play, or at least some of them, soon. But these are often students in Introduction to Literary Studies who are looking for bookish connections. And so showing them games that are directly inspired by literature, like Goblin Market, are unnatural to make that transition from we are studying serious literary works to adaptation studies has existed for decades. Generations of scholarship has been done on television and film and what have you. So why not TTRPGs? And this is also a question of genre, right? So rom-com drama bomb, which is also great as a format. This is the edition that is literally housed inside a DVD case, a game where there are 3 players, and is delightful and ridiculous. But in the last of the literary texts that I want to show them is like this 24 game poems the that there is like a kind of loop. Literature inspires games, and games in turn become inspiration fodder for poets and other writers who want to play with the form. This is the lyric game, right? In these kinds of ways. And as a book historian myself, I was particularly excited at PAX to see this set of works by Seb Pines and Will Jobst, one of 2 kind of collections that they've got. This one is around marginalia, scraps of paper, contents of letters, where you manipulate bookish objects in different kinds of ways in order to play the different games that are in here. And I kind of want to play some of them with my friends. There's a few more that I have to reach over for before we do this overview and we finish this. Also, acquisitions from PAX Unplugged this year. The solo journaling game, Librarian's Apprentice. These 2 stacks of tiny library games to show them how small these kinds of things can be. That, along with talking about Descended from the Queen games, are ways of getting them already starting to think about like an unessay can also be a game. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to make a big elaborate thing. And of course, the details of Our Escape and Beak, Feather, and Bone are long known to me, and I think I've had PDF copies of both of these, but now I have physical copies now that I've grabbed them at PAX, so very exciting. So that is literally everything I haul to class, along with commonplace books, but I'll probably talk about those at a different point. I'm curious if you're seeing things in the back behind me that you think I have woefully overlooked this time. I certainly emphasized my more recent acquisitions from PAX or the things that were small, as opposed to bringing things like Rocky and Bullwinkle or my big copy of Yazebas or Slug Blaster or those kinds of things. Those will probably show up at different points because, of course, we've got visitors coming to class. We're only a few weeks away from Jay Dragon and Meg A. Baker returning to Auburn to talk to them about story games. But first, we have to address a different part of game history. So, students' assignment for this weekend was to read H.G. Wells's Little Wars, and you can do it too. And I give you the same challenge that I'm going to give my students on Monday, which is here's some stuff. Play Little Wars. Figure it out. And I'll be reporting on how that goes next week. But for now, see you soon.